Alright guys, today I'm going to do this real quick installation video of my aftermarket shifter knob for your Toyota transmission. So this is actually the Jeep, Dodge Ram, Durango, Dakota shifter knob. This has been used from 1994 all the way through current. Finally ended usage in the Dodge Ram in 2024 was the last year. It was the transfer case handle. It was also the transmission handle, and they finally did away with the manual shifted transfer case in 2024 in the Rams. But you can see this thing being used for 30 years, and it was used for transfer cases, 5-speed, 6-speeds, and they just had a different replaceable cap in the top. This has always been my favorite shift knob, so I wanted to figure out how to put this on the Toyota. The biggest challenge was converting this to the Toyota thread, because Toyota thread's M12, Dodge is M10. So we had to go from a bigger thread to a smaller thread, and without actually just machining the shaft down to a smaller thread, you have to come up with some kind of adapter. So I came up with this guy. A very complex piece to machine because you have to have enough room to get that M12 thread inside the shifter knob, and that's a very tight hole. So it's extremely tight clearance. This just barely slides inside here, and we barely have enough wall thickness on this part to be able to have this internal thread. So that's what makes this thread adapter extremely complicated to make. It's very tight tolerances. It's just barely physically possible to make it. Installation's super simple though. There's two critical steps you must follow during this installation. We're going to put our red Loctite, it's semi-permanent thread locker, on these threads, or inside here, or both. Then you're simply going to thread this on. We do not want this adapter to ever move unless we want it to. So to take it off, you simply heat this part up, liquefy that red thread locker, and then this will spin right back off. We don't want it spinning unless we want it to though, because when we put this part on, if this would start spinning first, we'll never get this adapter out of our shifter knob. Now, that might not be that big of a deal, but I never liked the idea of a part being permanently lost. So on these threads, we're going to apply anti-seize to keep these threads freely spinning. Then you will simply put that on, spin it all the way down. Now, I'm not even going to do that because I'll never get this back off. I'm not going to Loctite it for this video. You'll spin this all the way down. Now, there is enough thread. There's probably plus or minus, you probably have a 1/4 to a 1/2 inch of adjustability of where you want this to be at. But you're going to thread this all the way down, and then these threads are going to protrude through the top inside the shift knob here. So then you're going to take the supplied M10 jam nut. You're going to put that on top. You're going to get the knob exactly where you want it. Then you're going to lock this jam nut down. That is going to keep this shift knob 100% solid. It's never going to spin on you like the Toyota knob did. So the way they made the Toyota knobs is they would drill a pilot hole. It's plastic. They would drill a pilot hole in here. They would tap maybe 2/3 of the depth of that hole. So you have the last third of that pilot hole doesn't have threads cut in it yet. And then you would thread it down onto the shifter stick. And once you reach the end of the threads, you would crank that sucker on and actually manually cut threads into the rest of that pilot hole. And that would basically be a really snug fit. Well, as people sit here and fidget and spin it, and these things are like 40 years old now. So that stuff's drying out and becoming brittle. They'd start to get loose and sloppy, and then you'd have knobs that always want to spin. I can say from experience with one of these, actually 2 of these knobs, it's 30 years old now. I didn't understand how they worked. I wanted to remove this knob, figure out how it worked, figure out what thread it had and all that. and I was putting all my force and might into trying to turn it off, the NV4500, and it wouldn't budge. And that is simply due to the design that uses this jam nut. So you don't have to worry about, because I've driven trucks where you go to shift and the shift knob spins and you miss a shift. You don't have to worry about that with this setup because this jam nut will keep this perfectly solid for you. Another benefit, actually two benefits of this setup in a Toyota is because we have this adapter, it's actually going to raise your shift knob. So that helps in the scenario where you have a body lift, because when you do a body lift, the body comes up, which means your seat comes up, which means your hand comes up. The transmission doesn't move. So this will help with the body lift because now it's raising the shifter knob back up to where it used to be. And it also gives us a longer lever, which means what? More leverage, which means it's easier to shift. So there's your two perks from just the positioning aspect. Another perk with this particular knob, since you have this void on the top between the jam nut and the cap, you can actually fill this with tungsten powder. Tungsten is like the densest thing there is. It's even denser than lead. So I'll put a link in the description. There's lots of different options. There's tungsten BBs, tungsten powder. Tungsten powder is going to give you your most density, especially for a space where space is pretty limited. But you can add weight. So you get the weight not only in the shift knob, but it's at the very top of the shift knob. That's another reason that my caps are stainless steel, just because that's heavier. And then at the top of the lever, you get that more weight. That gives you more leverage also for shifting. So once this is installed, then we have to put our cap on. Now for this step, you're going to want either a hair dryer or a heat gun, because we need to warm this up to make this nice and pliable so that we can manipulate the rubber around the cap. For this video demonstration, I'm going to use hot water because it's just easier for me on my end. But this will have to be done once it's installed on your shift stick. So, you know, more than likely going to be in your truck. So keep that in mind. You're going to need a heat gun or a hair dryer, and you're going to need a thin pry bar. I like to use a very small flathead screwdriver. So for this step, you need to warm up your shifter knob. You don't have to cook it, you don't have to melt it. We just need to warm it up to get that rubber nice and pliable, because when we go to install our cap, we actually have to manipulate the rubber around the cap. And we don't want to distort or disfigure the shifter knob, because then you're going to have an ugly gouge in it. So the cap does two things. It gives me a place to place my logo so we can have a cool looking custom design on our shifter knob, and it also fills out this dome shape on our shifter knob. So I have to machine a very specific curve into here to perfectly round out the top of this knob, and this knob actually has several different compound curves in it. So it took me quite a bit of trial and error to get these exactly where I want them. Once you get this warmed up, simply you're going to line up, and this is key. Make sure you line up the logo, because you're not going to be rotating this or the knob once this is assembled. It's going to be exactly where you put it. You're going to shove this lip down into the shifter knob. To get it started, you're going to, so we've got this just started in here, and you're going to put your screwdriver between the shoulder of the cap and the inside of the rubber, and you're just going to work it around, kind of like putting a tire over a wheel. And it's just as simple as that. It works really, really slick when you have this rubber warmed up nice. And then as that rubber cools off, that cap is going to sink, and if all goes right, you shouldn't really even see that seam. It should look seamless. And if you're looking at it from side profile, you can see that curve just continues out beautifully. Gives you a great feeling in your hand when you're shifting. And that's all there is to it. Told you it was simple. I wasn't lying. Thanks for watching. Check these out on the website. I'll leave the link in the description below. We'll see you in the next video.